Hello, how are you? Well, I think we've shifted directly into summer. It's either in the high 80s or low 90s right now. And it's good weather to walk in the shade of the trees. And of course, as you may see as I walk by them, look, the trees are not moving. There is no wind. uh, I don't like the breaking news cycle, which basically takes a story 3 days old and rehashes it. But I do think that some of the developments we have to look at. And I'm a little concerned about how everybody's giving themselves pats on the back for an agreement involving the debt limit and the elements that got us to raise the debt limit, which is something that should be perfunctory, gets people to get their rewards, if you will, to roll logs, to get their little neat, pleasant things. Of course, I'm thinking of the pipeline through Virginia, which has got nothing to do with anything except taking care of business. Could be a song. And that taking care of business is to, despite the law, despite court proceedings, to say, hey, go ahead, build the pipeline. Kick those people out of their houses, take their property to build a pipeline for your personal profit. And that's a good element. This is a huge case. Now, I am sure it's going to be fought. It's going to be fought in court. And I can think of a whole bunch of reasons why that statute or that bill that's going to be signed by the president is wrong. I spent more time on it than I planned to. The second thing is, how do we celebrate putting a burden on the least of us who require food and require they work when you know they've tried to work or can't work to begin with? It's just another way to not spend the money to help people who are at the edge. Poverty in America, and I'll have to talk about it sometime soon, poverty in America is a disgrace, a shame and a disgrace that a country like ours, with the wealth that we have, can't find a way, while taking care of the billionaires and the people wandering around golf courses, including the former president. And we can't feed our poor, we can't feed our homeless, we can't take care of those who are hungry. And if they're not taken care of, then they'll be relying on our so-called medical system, and we don't take care of them there either. So, but the most difficult thing is sort of like cheering, like we're watching a sport or a game that, well, in a game, the consequences are play. Yes, there's money and, people go on to other games and so forth. But in this game, there are soft targets that are crushed. And that's what we're doing. And there are people taking victory laps in both parties, saying what they did was great. What they did was a failure. It was a failure of their responsibility to find a responsible way to increase the debt limit and not to play games with how we spend public monies, either on, preserving and protecting our people, but also being concerned about business interests as well, and defense and so forth. But it shouldn't have been part of the increasing the limit. So I spoke about that more than I wanted to, so I guess I'm more annoyed about it than I realize. The other thing that tweaks me is the Supreme Court yesterday did something that's terribly aggravating. 8-1 decision. The only dissent was Jackson. And Jackson's dissent involved a construction company up in the state of Washington. And the people there decided to do a strike, a work stoppage, walk off the site. Now, concrete had been poured into the trucks at about the time this work stoppage started. Now, if one doesn't clear out the concrete while it's liquid, the trucks become useless. But the employers did find a way to get the concrete out of the trucks so that didn't happen. Yet, they bring a lawsuit against the union for being responsible for the work stoppage happening when the trucks were filled with concrete. 8 of the justices said, yeah, you could do that. Now, the state of Washington said no. The Supreme Court of the state said the supreme law of the land, National Labor Relations Act, NLRB, that takes care of the responsibilities of the parties, and the union had no obligation to preserve and protect the business. In fact, what is the point of a strike if not to put stress on the employer so that the employer comes to the bargaining table? And the flip side of that is when the union dues become too thin to support the striking workers, that brings them to the bargaining table. Now, this is not the first time this happened. Biden did this over the railroad strike. He said they couldn't strike. Their business decision. So you see, we're turning the clock backwards. Not that those of us who follow labor matters and employment matters haven't seen this for some time. America is all for the business, but not for the worker, and that's just not acceptable. Jackson said in her dissent, which is longer than the major decision, excuse me for coughing because there's some dust in the air, and Jackson basically said that the union is not responsible for the losses, as did the Supreme Court in Washington State. So that's a bad decision. Now, last night, and one of the reasons I didn't get a chance to do a walk and talk yesterday is because last night I was at a meeting in which I sought the endorsement of the Democratic Committee for the county for the soil and water position that I'm seeking as director. And it's a 4-year term, and I've done it before, and my devotion to the issue is what overrides any of the other considerations. It's not a job that's a stalking horse for some other position in politics. If that happened, well, so be it, but that's not why I'm doing it, why I have done it. So last night, they did me the honor of endorsing me, and it was good to be with people who care about these things, and they had several questions afterwards. And I always find that the most interesting part of any meeting, because you get to hear what the people think. And I'm not even saying that the questions are always easy to field, but in my experience, they're mostly good. The only time that they border on annoying is when somebody gets up to give a speech themselves instead of just asking a question. That didn't happen last night. In fact, this is a practiced way that the local committee does this. Years ago, I was a chair of the party, so I'm very respectful and understanding of a chair, and the chair of this meeting did very well. So I'm concerned about what we're doing with our water, both its quality and frankly, the inventory of water, drinkable water, worldwide. And another case example, which is just off the Colorado River really, is in Phoenix. What they found is their groundwater is not enough to sustain the building explosion they've had in Phoenix. So there are 5 million people in Phoenix, and groundwater, as you may or may not know, it rains. The water goes to the earth. If it's permeable, it goes through the surface, it goes down, and it collects in aquifers or exists in the soil. If you're on a well and septic system, you directly tap into that, you bring the water up, and you may treat the water as it comes into your house, but that's how it works. Well, they're putting more houses than there's an availability of water to satisfy the demand for water in this fashion. So what are they doing? The government is limiting such development projects to areas where there's a guaranteed 100 years going forward of water. And if there's not, they're not approved. So there are some developers that are taking a real hit and, of course, fighting it. But some recognize the fact you can't sell a house without water. You just can't do it. Now, what some are doing, some communities, is they are paying for water from those on the Colorado River, farmers. So remember, we have the government paying off certain farmers not to build a crop, plant a crop, work a crop, sell a crop, but. And I don't know if it's the same people, but we have some farmers selling their water to communities. And so that creates a very interesting situation. The former mayor of Phoenix says you have to get used to the fact there's less water. Now, this may sound like it's far away, but, you know, when you look at these developments we're having that suck our water up and that we think is okay when we don't even know what the inventory is and we don't know what the prospect is for these technologies, well, then we're doing something that's irresponsible. You know, short-term profits for some people at the expense of communities. So that's what we have to do. So I'm enduring more warmth than I wanted, but it still is beautiful out. And I hope you're doing well. And I expect I'll be out tomorrow to talk. And maybe I can steal a swim sometime tomorrow. That just sounds like so much more sense. So I say hello to you and au revoir from my cathedral of trees. Bye-bye.